Bear cub wedged in a city tram. Coupling and took it to hospital. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning fog hung thick over the city streets like a gray blanket, muffling the usual sounds of traffic and footsteps. Zara Chen pushed her 18-month-old daughter Lily's stroller along the sidewalk, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The old tram tracks gleamed wet beneath the streetlights, and somewhere in the distance, the familiar rumble of the morning tram grew louder. Lily babbled softly from her stroller, her tiny mittened hands reaching out toward the fog, as if trying to catch the floating droplets. Her dark eyes sparkled with the kind of wonder that only babies possess, seeing magic in the most ordinary things. Zara smiled down at her daughter, adjusting the pink blanket around her small frame. "Almost there, sweetheart," Zara whispered, checking her phone for the time. She was running late for her job at the downtown office, but these quiet morning walks with Lily were precious to her. The city was different at this hour, softer somehow, before the rush of people and noise took over. The tram's bell clanged twice in the distance, signaling its approach to the next stop. Zara quickened her pace slightly, knowing she could catch it and save herself a 20-minute walk. The fog was starting to lift, revealing more of the empty street ahead, but then she heard it, a sound that made her stop dead in her tracks, a soft whimpering, almost like a puppy, but different, more desperate, more afraid. Zara paused, tilting her head to listen. The sound came again, weak and pitiful, coming from somewhere near the tram tracks ahead. She looked around the deserted street, seeing nothing but empty storefronts and parked cars shrouded in mist. Lily had stopped babbling too, as if she could sense something was wrong. Her little face turned toward the sound, her eyes wide and alert in a way that seemed far too knowing for such a young child. The whimpering grew more urgent, and Zara felt her heart begin to race. Something was in pain, something that needed help. She pushed the stroller forward slowly, her eyes scanning the foggy street for any sign of movement. As she got closer to the tram tracks, the sound became clearer. It wasn't a dog, it was something else entirely, something that shouldn't be in the middle of a city street at 7 in the morning. The fog parted slightly, and Zara's breath caught in her throat. There, wedged between the metal coupling of two parked tram cars, was a small brown bear cub. Its tiny paw was trapped in the narrow gap between the heavy metal pieces, and it was crying in a way that broke Zara's heart instantly. The cub couldn't have been more than a few months old, its fur still fluffy with youth, its dark eyes filled with terror and confusion. Zara stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. A bear cub, in the middle of the city, trapped and alone. The cub looked up at her with those dark, frightened eyes, and let out another soft whimper that seemed to say, "Please, help me." Its little body was shaking, whether from cold or fear, Zara couldn't tell. She looked around desperately, hoping to see someone, anyone, who might know what to do. But the street remained empty, the fog still thick enough to hide them from the rest of the world. Even the approaching tram seemed to have stopped somewhere in the distance. Its rumbling faded to silence. Lily made a soft cooing sound, and when Zara looked down she saw her daughter leaning forward in her stroller, her small arms reaching toward the trapped cub. There was something in Lily's expression that Zara had never seen before, a kind of understanding that seemed impossible for someone so young. The cub's whimpering grew weaker, and Zara realized with growing horror that the metal coupling was slowly tightening. The tram cars were settling on their tracks, and the gap where the cub's paw was trapped was getting smaller. She had to do something. But what? She couldn't approach a wild animal, even a baby one. She didn't know if the cub would bite or scratch in its panic. And where was its mother? The thought sent a chill down Zara's spine that had nothing to do with the cold morning air. But as she stood there, paralyzed by indecision, Lily began to make soft sounds, almost like she was trying to comfort the frightened cub. The baby's voice was gentle and soothing, the kind of wordless communication that seemed to transcend species. And incredibly, impossibly, the cub began to calm down. Its desperate struggling slowed, and it turned its head toward Lily's voice. For a moment, the two babies looked at each other across the few feet that separated them, and Zara felt something shift in the air around them, something that made her believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. But then she heard new sounds from the fog. Heavy footsteps, multiple sets of them, and they were getting closer. The footsteps weren't human. Zara's blood turned to ice as she realized what she was hearing: the heavy, deliberate padding of large paws on wet pavement, the soft, huffing breath of something much bigger than the tiny cub trapped in the tram coupling. Her hands gripped the stroller handle so tightly her knuckles went white. "Oh, God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The mother." Through the thick fog, a massive shape began to emerge. First, she could make out the dark outline of a large head, then broad shoulders, and finally the full form of an adult black bear moving toward them with surprising grace for something so large. The mother bear's eyes were locked on her trapped cub, and even from a distance, Zara could see the desperate worry in those dark, intelligent eyes. The mother bear stopped about 20 feet away, her massive body tense with anxiety. She let out a low, rumbling call to her cub, a sound that was both gentle and heartbreaking. The little cub responded with a weak whimper, trying again to pull its trapped paw free. Zara wanted to run. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to grab Lily and get as far away as possible. But her legs felt like they were made of stone. And besides, where could she go? The mother bear was between her and the nearest escape route. But something strange was happening. The mother bear wasn't charging. She wasn't showing her teeth or making threatening gestures. Instead, she seemed almost as lost and confused as Zara felt. The great beast kept looking between her trapped cub and the humans, as if trying to figure out what to do. Lily had gone completely quiet in her stroller, but she wasn't afraid. If anything, she seemed more alert than ever, her dark eyes moving between the mother bear and her cub with an intensity that made Zara's heart race for entirely different reasons. Then Lily did something that made Zara's world stop spinning. The 18-month-old pushed herself up in her stroller and reached out both of her tiny arms toward the mother bear. Not toward the cub, but toward the massive, dangerous predator that could kill them both with a single swipe of her paw. "Lily, no," Zara breathed, but her daughter ignored her completely. The baby made a soft sound, almost like a purr, and the mother bear's ears perked up. The great head tilted slightly, studying the small human child with obvious confusion and something that looked almost like curiosity. Lily made the sound again, and this time, incredibly, the mother bear took a step closer. Zara felt like she was trapped in a dream, or maybe a nightmare. None of this made sense. Bears didn't behave this way. Babies didn't communicate with wild animals. This couldn't be happening. But it was happening, and it was getting stranger by the second. The mother bear approached slowly, her eyes never leaving Lily's face. When she was close enough that Zara could smell her wild, earthy scent, she stopped again. The two of them, the massive predator and the tiny human baby, seemed to be having some kind of conversation that Zara couldn't understand. The trapped cub whimpered again, weaker this time, and both the mother bear and Lily turned toward the sound. The metal coupling had tightened even more, and Zara could see that the cub's paw was beginning to swell. If they didn't do something soon, the little one might lose its foot entirely. That's when Lily pointed. The baby's tiny finger extended toward the trapped cub, and she made a series of urgent sounds that, while not quite words, seemed to carry clear meaning. She was trying to tell the mother bear something about her cub's situation. The mother bear followed Lily's pointing finger and seemed to understand immediately. She moved toward the tram coupling, but when she tried to use her powerful jaws to pull the metal apart, the cub cried out in pain. The mother bear stepped back, frustrated and clearly distressed. Lily made more sounds, softer this time, almost soothing. Then she pointed again, but this time toward Zara. Both bears, mother and cub, turned to look at Zara with expectant eyes. "You want me to help?" Zara whispered, feeling ridiculous for talking to wild animals, but somehow certain that they understood her. Lily clapped her small hands together and bounced in her stroller. The mother bear made a soft chuffing sound that almost sounded like agreement. Zara looked at the trapped cub, then at the mother bear, then at her daughter's encouraging face. This was insane. She was a marketing assistant, not a wildlife expert. She had no idea how to free a trapped bear cub without making things worse. But as she stood there, paralyzed by uncertainty, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. The fog was beginning to lift more quickly now, and in the growing light she could see that they weren't alone on the street anymore. Other shapes were moving in the mist, coming from different directions. At first, she thought it might be other people, but as they drew closer, she realized the truth. More bears. A small group of them moving through the city streets like they owned the place. Some were adults, others were younger, but all of them seemed to be heading in their direction. It was like they had been called, summoned by some signal that only they could hear. Zara's mind raced. A family group? But that didn't make sense either. Black bears didn't usually travel in large groups, especially not in urban areas. This was beyond unusual. This was unprecedented. The mother bear beside her seemed to sense the approaching group as well. She lifted her massive head and made a series of low calls, almost like she was communicating with the others. The responses came back through the fog, a chorus of huffs and grunts that sounded almost like conversation. Lily was absolutely fascinated by all of this. She was making excited sounds and reaching out toward each new bear as they emerged from the mist. And impossibly, each one seemed to acknowledge her, pausing to look at the baby human with what appeared to be respect. But the trapped cub was getting weaker. Its whimpering had become barely audible, and its small body was going limp. Time was running out. That's when Zara noticed something that changed everything. One of the approaching bears was dragging something in its mouth. As it got closer, she could see that it was a piece of metal pipe, the kind used in construction. The bear dropped it at the feet of the mother bear and stepped back. Another bear approached from a different direction, this one carrying what looked like a small crowbar in its jaws. It, too, dropped its offering and stepped back. Zara stared in amazement as more bears arrived, each bringing some kind of tool or implement. Pieces of rebar, a tire iron, even what looked like a hydraulic jack that must have weighed more than the bear carrying it. "They're bringing tools," she whispered, unable to believe what she was seeing. "They understand that we need tools to free the cub." The mother bear looked at her again, and this time there was no mistaking the intelligence in those dark eyes. She was waiting for Zara to use the tools her family had brought, but before Zara could move, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Sirens. Multiple sirens, coming from different directions and getting closer fast. Someone had called the authorities about bears in the city, and when they arrived, Zara knew exactly what would happen. The bears would be seen as a threat. They would be tranquilized, relocated, or worse. The mother bear would be separated from her cub, and the little one trapped in the coupling might not survive the rescue attempt by people who didn't understand the delicate situation they had stumbled into. Lily seemed to sense the approaching danger, too. She started making urgent sounds, pointing between the tools and the trapped cub. Her message was clear. They had to act now, before the authorities arrived and ruined everything. The mother bear looked toward the sound of the sirens, then back at Zara. There was a question in her eyes and a plea. She was asking Zara to choose sides, to help her family, or to wait for the humans who might destroy everything they were trying to accomplish. Zara looked at her daughter, who was watching her with absolute trust and confidence. Lily believed in her completely, believed that her mother could do anything. The sirens were getting closer. The cub's whimpering was getting weaker. And surrounding them, a family of bears waited to see what this human woman would do. Zara took a deep breath and stepped forward to pick up the crowbar. The metal felt cold and heavy in her hands, much heavier than she had expected. She had never used a crowbar before, had never been in a situation where she needed to pry apart metal machinery to save a life. Her marketing degree hadn't exactly prepared her for this moment. The mother bear watched her every movement with intense focus, as if she understood exactly what Zara was trying to do. The other bears formed a loose circle around them, but they didn't feel threatening. If anything, they seemed protective, like they were creating a barrier between this delicate rescue and the outside world. Lily continued making soft, encouraging sounds from her stroller, her tiny hands clapping together every time Zara moved closer to the trapped cub. The baby's confidence was both inspiring and terrifying. What if Zara made things worse? What if she hurt the cub while trying to help it? The sirens were definitely getting closer now. Zara could hear the screech of tires on wet pavement as emergency vehicles navigated the narrow city streets. She had maybe 5 minutes before they arrived. Maybe less. She knelt down beside the tram coupling, trying to figure out the best angle to insert the crowbar. The cub looked up at her with those dark, pain-filled eyes, and she felt her heart break a little more. The little one's paw was swollen now, definitely injured, but still moving slightly. That was good. That meant there was still feeling, still hope. "Okay, little one," she whispered to the cub. "I'm going to try to help you, but I need you to stay very still." The cub seemed to understand. It stopped struggling and lay its head down, as if resigned to whatever was about to happen. The mother bear made a soft sound that seemed like encouragement, both to her cub and to Zara. Zara inserted the crowbar into the gap just above where the cub's paw was trapped. She pushed down gently, testing the resistance. The metal gave slightly, but not nearly enough. She was going to need more leverage. That's when one of the other bears stepped forward. It was a large male, bigger even than the mother bear, with scars across his snout that spoke of a long, hard life in the wild. He positioned himself next to Zara and incredibly placed his massive paws on the other end of the crowbar. Zara stared at him in amazement. "You want to help me push?" The big bear looked at her with what she could have sworn was a nod. Then he began to apply pressure to his end of the crowbar, coordinating his efforts with hers. Together, human and bear worked to pry apart the metal coupling. Zara pushed down while the big male pushed up, creating opposing forces that gradually began to widen the gap. The metal groaned and protested, but it was moving. The trapped cub whimpered softly as the pressure on its paw lessened. Just a little more, and it would be free. But then Zara heard something that made her freeze in terror. Footsteps, human footsteps, running toward them through the fog. "Over here," a man's voice shouted. "I can hear them." The circle of bears immediately tensed, their protective instincts kicking in. Several of them turned toward the approaching humans, and for the first time since this whole strange encounter began, Zara saw them bare their teeth. "No, wait," she called out to the unseen humans. "Don't come any closer. You'll scare them." But it was too late. 3 figures emerged from the fog, and Zara's heart sank as she saw what they were carrying. Tranquilizer guns. The men were wearing the uniforms of animal control officers, and they had come prepared to deal with dangerous wildlife. From their perspective, they were looking at a group of wild bears threatening a woman and her baby. They couldn't see what Zara saw: the intelligence, the cooperation, the desperate family trying to save one of their own. "Ma'am, step away from the animals immediately," the lead officer shouted, raising his tranquilizer gun. "We're here to help." The mother bear let out a warning growl, positioning herself between the officers and her trapped cub. The other bears closed ranks, their earlier gentleness replaced by fierce protectiveness. "No, you don't understand," Zara called back. "They're not trying to hurt anyone. The cub is trapped, and they're trying to help me free it." "Ma'am, please step away from the bears," the officer repeated, his voice firm but not unkind. "These are wild animals. They're unpredictable and dangerous." Lily started crying then. Not the frightened crying of a scared baby, but the angry, frustrated crying of someone who knew that the adults around her were about to make a terrible mistake. She reached out toward the mother bear, making urgent sounds that seemed to say, "Don't hurt her, she's my friend." The standoff stretched on for several long seconds. The animal control officers with their tranquilizer guns, the bears protecting their family, and Zara caught in the middle with a crowbar in her hands and a trapped cub at her feet. That's when something happened that changed everything. Lily managed to unbuckle herself from her stroller. Before Zara could react, her 18-month-old daughter had climbed out of her seat and was toddling toward the mother bear on unsteady legs. The animal control officers shouted warnings. The bears stirred nervously, and Zara's heart nearly stopped. But the mother bear didn't attack. Instead, she lowered her massive head and allowed the tiny human child to place her small hands on the bear's snout. Lily made soft cooing sounds, the same sounds she made when she was trying to comfort her stuffed animals at home. The effect was immediate and stunning. The mother bear's entire body relaxed, and she made a gentle rumbling sound deep in her throat. The other bears, seeing their matriarch's acceptance of the human child, also began to calm down. Even the animal control officers lowered their weapons slightly, staring in amazement at the impossible scene before them. "I've never seen anything like this," one of them whispered. But Lily wasn't done. She turned away from the mother bear and walked over to the trapped cub with the confidence of someone who had never learned to fear anything. She knelt down beside the little one and began making the same comforting sounds. The cub's whimpering stopped immediately. It looked up at Lily with complete trust, as if it had been waiting for her to arrive. Then Lily looked up at Zara and pointed at the crowbar. Her message was clear. "Keep going, Mama. Save the baby." Zara looked at the animal control officers, then at the bears, then at her daughter's determined face. The sirens were getting even closer now. More vehicles were coming, probably police cars and maybe even news crews. Soon, this quiet street would be swarming with people who wouldn't understand what they were seeing. She had to act now. "Please," she called out to the officers. "Give me 2 more minutes. I can free the cub, but I need you to trust me." The lead officer hesitated, his tranquilizer gun still raised, but no longer aimed directly at the bears. He looked at Lily, still comforting the trapped cub, then at the mother bear, who was watching everything with intelligent, worried eyes. "This is against every protocol we have," he said finally. "But, okay, 2 minutes. But if any of those bears make a move toward you or your daughter, we're taking them down." Zara nodded and returned to her work. The big male bear immediately resumed his position at the other end of the crowbar, ready to help. Together, they applied pressure to the metal coupling. But just as the gap began to widen enough for the cub to pull its paw free, Zara heard a new sound that filled her with dread. A helicopter. The rhythmic thump of rotor blades cut through the morning air, and Zara knew that their quiet rescue mission was about to become a media circus. Soon, there would be cameras everywhere, capturing every moment of this impossible encounter between humans and bears. The noise of the helicopter spooked some of the bears. A few of the younger ones started backing away from the scene, their natural fear of human machinery overriding their family loyalty. But the mother bear and the big male stayed put. They had come too far to give up now. The trapped cub made a weak sound, and Zara realized with growing panic that the little one was losing consciousness. The injury to its paw, combined with the stress and cold, was taking its toll. If they didn't free it in the next few minutes, it might not survive. "Come on," Zara muttered, putting all her strength into the crowbar. "Come on, please." The metal groaned and shifted. The gap was almost wide enough. Just a little more. That's when the helicopter spotlight hit them. The brilliant white light cut through the fog like a sword, illuminating the entire scene in stark detail. The bears, the humans, the trapped cub, and most importantly Lily, still kneeling beside the injured animal like some kind of tiny guardian angel. The sight was so striking, so impossible, that even the helicopter seemed to hover motionless for a moment, as if the pilot couldn't believe what he was seeing. But the light and noise were too much for some of the bears. 3 of them broke away from the group and ran back into the fog, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. The remaining bears, including the mother and the big male helping Zara, stood their ground, but she could see the stress in their eyes. Lily seemed oblivious to all the chaos around her. She continued making soft sounds to the cub, her small hands gently stroking its fur. The little bear had stopped whimpering entirely now, seemingly comforted by the baby's presence. "Almost there," Zara said, as much to herself as to anyone else. The crowbar was working. The gap was widening. The cub's paw was almost free. But then she heard something that made her blood turn to ice. More sirens. Lots more sirens. And they were all converging on their location. The animal control officer was talking rapidly into his radio, trying to explain the situation to whoever was coordinating the response. But Zara could tell from his tone that he was having trouble making people believe what he was seeing. "No, I'm telling you, the bears aren't aggressive," she heard him say. "The baby is actually... No, I know how it sounds, but you need to see this." The helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight sweeping back and forth across the scene. Zara could see other aircraft in the distance, probably news helicopters drawn by reports of wild animals in the city. This was spiraling out of control fast. Soon there would be crowds of people, reporters, more officials. The bears would be overwhelmed by all the attention, and any chance of a peaceful resolution would disappear. But they were so close. The cub's paw was almost free. Just another inch or two. That's when Lily did something that nobody could have predicted. She stood up, walked over to where Zara was working with the crowbar, and placed her tiny hands on the metal coupling. Then she looked up at her mother and said, clear as day, her very first word, "Help." It wasn't baby babble. It wasn't a random sound. It was a perfectly pronounced word, spoken with the urgency of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. The mother bear heard it too. She looked at Lily with something that could only be described as recognition, as if she finally understood what this strange human child had been trying to tell her all along. Then the bear did something that defied everything Zara thought she knew about wildlife. She began to cry, real tears streaming down her dark fur as she looked at her trapped cub. The sound she made was heartbreaking, a keening wail that seemed to express all the fear and love and desperation of a mother watching her baby suffer. The effect on everyone present was immediate and profound. The animal control officers lowered their weapons completely. The helicopter seemed to hover more quietly. Even Lily stopped making sounds and simply reached out to touch the grieving mother bear's face. And in that moment of perfect, impossible understanding between species, the metal coupling finally gave way. The cub's paw slipped free, and the little one immediately scrambled toward its mother, limping but alive. The mother bear gathered her baby close, nuzzling and licking the injured paw while making soft, reassuring sounds. But the rescue wasn't over yet. The cub was free, but it was also badly hurt. Its paw was swollen and possibly broken, and it had been trapped for who knows how long. It needed medical attention, the kind that only a veterinary hospital could provide. Zara looked around at the approaching sirens, the circling helicopters, the growing chaos that threatened to overwhelm this moment of triumph. She had to think fast. "We need to get the cub to a hospital," she called out to the animal control officer. "It's hurt badly." "Ma'am, we can't just take a wild bear to a veterinary hospital," the officer replied. "There are protocols, procedures." But Lily had other ideas. She pointed toward the street where the first police cars were starting to arrive, their red and blue lights flashing through the fog. Then she pointed at the injured cub. Then she pointed at Zara's car, parked just a few feet away. Her meaning was crystal clear. "We're taking the baby to the hospital ourselves." The mother bear seemed to understand too. She looked at Zara's car, then at Lily, then at her injured cub. For a moment, Zara thought she saw the bear nod, but taking a wild bear cub to a veterinary hospital was illegal, dangerous, and probably impossible. The authorities would never allow it. The hospital might not even treat a wild animal. And how would they explain any of this to anyone? As if reading her thoughts, the big male bear who had helped with the crowbar walked over to Zara's car and sat down beside it. He wasn't blocking their way. He was waiting. Waiting to see what the humans would do next. The other remaining bears did the same, positioning themselves around the car like an honor guard. They weren't threatening anyone, but their message was clear. This is important. This matters. Don't let bureaucracy get in the way of saving a life. Lily clapped her hands together and looked up at Zara with absolute confidence. In her daughter's eyes, Zara could see complete faith that her mother would do the right thing, no matter how impossible it seemed. The police cars were getting closer. The helicopters were circling lower. Soon there would be no choice left at all. Zara looked at the injured cub, then at its worried mother, then at her daughter's trusting face. She opened her car door. The mother bear immediately understood what Zara was offering. Without hesitation, she gently picked up her injured cub in her massive jaws and carried it toward the open car. The little one didn't struggle or cry out. It seemed to trust its mother completely, even in this strange situation. But as the mother bear approached the car, Zara realized there was a problem she hadn't considered. The bear was huge, easily 3 times the size of Lily. There was no way she would fit in the back seat with the cub and still leave room for the car seats. The mother bear seemed to realize this too. She stopped beside the car and looked at Zara with questioning eyes, still holding her injured baby. That's when Lily solved the problem in a way that left everyone speechless. The 18-month-old walked up to the mother bear and held out her arms, making the same gestures she used when she wanted to be picked up. But she wasn't looking at Zara or asking for her mother's attention. She was asking the bear to give her the cub. "Lily? No," Zara breathed, her heart hammering in her chest. "Sweetie, that's not a toy. That's a wild animal." But Lily ignored her completely. She kept her arms outstretched, looking up at the mother bear with complete confidence. She made soft cooing sounds, the same sounds she had been making all morning to comfort the frightened animals. The mother bear looked down at the tiny human child, then at her injured cub, then back at Lily. For a long moment, nobody moved. The police sirens were getting closer. The helicopter was circling lower, and the animal control officers were watching this impossible scene with growing amazement. Then, incredibly, the mother bear lowered her head and gently placed the injured cub in Lily's outstretched arms. The cub was nearly as big as Lily herself, but somehow the baby managed to hold it securely. She cradled the injured animal against her chest the same way she held her stuffed animals at home, making soft, soothing sounds that seemed to calm the frightened cub immediately. Zara stared in shock as her daughter, barely able to walk steadily on her own, carried a wild bear cub toward the car like it was the most natural thing in the world. The cub wasn't struggling or trying to escape. If anything, it seemed to relax in Lily's arms, its pain-filled whimpers quieting to almost nothing. "This is impossible," one of the animal control officers whispered. "Bears don't behave this way. And babies can't handle wild animals like this." But it was happening right in front of their eyes. Lily climbed into the back seat, still holding the cub, and somehow managed to get both of them situated safely. She even reached over and pulled the seatbelt across both of them, as if she had done this 100 times before. The mother bear watched this entire process with intense focus, never taking her eyes off her cub. When Lily was settled in the car with the injured baby, the mother bear looked at Zara and made a sound that was unmistakably a request. She wanted to come too. "I don't think you'll fit," Zara said softly, gesturing at the car's interior. The mother bear studied the car for a moment, then did something that made Zara question everything she thought she knew about animal intelligence. She walked around to the passenger side, opened the door with her massive paw, and somehow managed to squeeze herself into the front seat. It was a tight fit, and the car's suspension groaned under her weight, but she managed it. She even pulled the door closed behind her, though the window had to be rolled down to accommodate her large head. The big male bear who had helped with the crowbar approached the driver's side window. He looked at Zara with those intelligent dark eyes and made a soft huffing sound. Then he began to walk away, but not randomly. He was heading in a specific direction, and he kept looking back to make sure Zara was watching. "I think he wants us to follow him," Zara said, feeling like she was losing her mind. "I think he knows where the hospital is." The animal control officer who had been talking to her stepped up to the driver's window. "Ma'am, I have to advise against this. What you're proposing is dangerous and probably illegal. We should wait for proper wildlife veterinarians to arrive." "How long will that take?" Zara asked. The officer hesitated. "Could be hours, maybe longer. It's not like we have a lot of bear specialists on call in the city." Zara looked back at Lily, who was still cradling the injured cub. The little bear's breathing was shallow, and its injured paw was swelling worse by the minute. Hours might be too long. The mother bear in the passenger seat made a low, urgent sound and looked meaningfully toward where the big male was waiting for them to follow. "2 minutes ago, you were ready to tranquilize these bears," Zara said to the officer. "Now you can see what I'm seeing. They're not just animals. They're a family, and they're desperate to save their baby, just like I would be desperate to save Lily." The officer looked at the scene in the car, a human baby holding a bear cub while the mother bear waited patiently in the passenger seat. He shook his head slowly. "In 20 years of animal control, I've never seen anything like this." "So let us go," Zara pleaded. Give us a police escort to the veterinary hospital. Help us instead of stopping us." The officer was quiet for a long moment, listening to his radio as more units reported their positions. The first police cars were turning onto their street now, their lights flashing through the morning fog. "You know what's going to happen when my supervisors get here," he said finally. "They're going to see wild bears in a residential area, and they're going to follow standard protocol. Those bears are going to be tranquilized and relocated, regardless of the circumstances. Even the injured cub? Especially the injured cub. It'll be seen as too dangerous to treat in a regular veterinary facility." Zara felt her heart sink. After everything they had been through, after the impossible cooperation between species, after Lily's miraculous ability to communicate with the bears, it was all going to end with bureaucracy and fear. But then the officer surprised her. "However," he said, reaching for his radio, "if you were to leave right now, before my supervisors arrive, and if you were to encounter some unexpected traffic delays that prevented you from being easily followed, well, I might be too busy managing the scene here to notice which direction you went." Zara stared at him. "You're helping us?" "I'm helping that cub," he said, nodding toward the injured bear in Lily's arms. "And I'm helping those bears who brought tools to try to free their family member. That kind of intelligence and cooperation deserves a chance." He keyed his radio. "Control, we're going to need traffic management on several streets. I'm going to send you a list of intersections that need to be temporarily blocked while we sort out this situation." As he began giving detailed instructions that would effectively clear a path to the veterinary hospital while creating confusion about their location, Zara realized he was giving them a window of opportunity. The big male bear was still waiting, looking back at them expectantly. The remaining bears had formed a loose procession, ready to escort them wherever they needed to go. Zara started the engine. The mother bear in the passenger seat immediately perked up, as if she understood that they were finally moving toward help for her cub. She made a soft sound that might have been encouragement or gratitude. From the back seat, Lily said clearly, "Go, Mama." It was her second word of the day, spoken with the same impossible clarity as her first, and like her first word, it came at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right meaning. Zara put the car in drive and began to follow the big male bear down the foggy street. What she didn't expect was what happened next. As they drove through the city, more bears began to appear, not running or hiding, but walking purposefully alongside the car. Some emerged from alleys, others from parks, and a few even seemed to come down from rooftops. Within minutes, their small procession had become something that looked more like a parade. People on the sidewalk stopped and stared in amazement. Some pulled out their phones to record videos. Others just watched in stunned silence as a car escorted by a dozen bears made its way through the morning traffic. The bears weren't behaving like wild animals at all. They stayed in formation, kept pace with the car, and seemed to know exactly where they were going. When traffic lights turned red, they stopped. When pedestrians needed to cross the street, they waited patiently. It was as if the entire city had become part of some impossible fairy tale. But the most amazing part was how people reacted. Instead of panic or fear, Zara saw wonder on their faces. Children pressed against windows to get a better look. Adults stood with their mouths open, trying to process what they were seeing. A few blocks from the veterinary hospital, something even more extraordinary happened. Cars began to pull over to let them pass. Not because they were afraid, but because they seemed to understand that this was important. A taxi driver rolled down his window and called out, "Is the baby okay?" A woman walking her dog started walking alongside the procession, as if she wanted to be part of whatever was happening. By the time they reached the veterinary hospital, There were at least 20 people following on foot, and news vans were starting to appear from various directions. The story was spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. But as they pulled into the hospital parking lot, Zara realized they faced a new problem. How do you explain to a veterinary hospital that you need emergency treatment for a wild bear cub, and that the cub's mother insists on being present for the procedure, and that your 18-month-old daughter seems to be the only one who can keep the patient calm? The mother bear was already getting out of the car, moving carefully but with obvious urgency. Lily was climbing out of her seat, still cradling the injured cub like it was her own baby brother. The other bears had formed a protective circle around the hospital entrance, not threatening anyone but making it clear that they weren't leaving without their family member. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the hospital's chief veterinarian, came out to see what was causing the commotion in her parking lot. She took one look at the scene. The bears, the human baby holding an injured cub, the growing crowd of onlookers, and her professional composure cracked. "What in the world?" she began. That's when Lily looked up at her and said, with perfect clarity, "Help, baby bear." 3 words this time. 3 impossible words from a child who yesterday could barely say mama and dada. Dr. Martinez looked at the injured cub in Lily's arms, then at the mother bear who was watching her with desperate, intelligent eyes. As a veterinarian, she had seen plenty of wild animals, but she had never seen anything like this. "Bring them inside," she said finally. "All of them. We'll figure out the paperwork later." But as they started toward the hospital entrance, Zara heard a sound that made her heart skip a beat. More sirens, lots of them, and they were coming from multiple directions. The authorities had tracked them down, and they were bringing reinforcements. The peaceful, impossible morning was about to become a confrontation that could end with the bears being separated from their injured family member, possibly forever. The mother bear heard the sirens too. She looked at Zara with eyes that seemed to say, "Please, don't let them take my baby away from me now." Lily heard them as well. She looked up at the approaching sounds, then at the mother bear, then at her own mother. Her expression was serious, far too serious for such a young child. "Bad sounds," she said clearly. "Hide baby bear." 4 words. 4 impossible words that somehow captured exactly what they all needed to do. Dr. Martinez looked at the approaching sirens, then at the unusual family group in her parking lot. She made a decision that would change everything. "Emergency entrance," she said quickly, "right now, before they get here." But as they hurried toward the hospital, Zara realized that their problems were just beginning. Because standing in the emergency entrance, blocking their way, was a man in a dark suit with a badge hanging from his belt. He wasn't animal control or police. He was something else entirely. Federal Wildlife Enforcement. And he looked like he had been waiting for them. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "I'm going to need you to step away from the bears. All of them. Right now." The man's hand was resting on his weapon, and his eyes were cold and professional. Unlike the local animal control officer who had helped them escape, this man showed no interest in the miraculous nature of what was happening. He saw only wild animals that needed to be controlled. But Lily wasn't intimidated. She looked up at the federal agent and said, with remarkable clarity for someone her age, "No hurt, Mama Bear." 5 words, clear, defiant, and absolutely heartbreaking. The mother bear stepped protectively closer to Lily, and for the first time all morning, Zara saw her bare her teeth in a genuine threat display. The situation was about to spiral completely out of control. But before anyone could move, before the federal agent could draw his weapon or the mother bear could charge, something extraordinary happened that changed everything. The injured cub in Lily's arms made a sound, It wasn't the weak whimpering they had been hearing all morning. It was something else entirely. A sound that no one present had ever heard a bear make before. It was almost like singing, a series of melodic notes that seemed to carry meaning beyond simple animal communication. The effect was immediate and stunning. Every bear in the parking lot stopped moving and turned toward the sound. The mother bear's threatening posture melted away as she focused entirely on her cub. Even the federal agent paused, his hand moving away from his weapon as he tried to process what he was hearing. But the most remarkable thing was what happened to Lily. The 18-month-old began to respond to the cub's song with sounds of her own. Not words this time, but musical notes that seemed to harmonize with what the injured bear was producing. It was as if they were having a conversation in a language that predated human speech, something primal and pure that touched everyone who heard it. Dr. Martinez stood transfixed, tears streaming down her face as she listened to this impossible duet between human child and bear cub. "In 30 years of veterinary medicine," she whispered, "I've never heard anything like this." The federal agent lowered his hand completely from his weapon. His professional composure was cracking as he watched the scene unfold. "What is that sound?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder rather than authority. "I think," Zara said softly, "it's the sound of two babies who understand each other perfectly." The cub's song was getting weaker now, the notes becoming more strained. The little one was exhausted and in pain, and even this miraculous communication was taking its toll. But Lily seemed to understand. She adjusted her own sounds, making them more soothing, more encouraging. The mother bear approached slowly, no longer seeing the federal agent as a threat. Her entire focus was on her singing cub and the human baby who was somehow able to respond. She nuzzled both children gently, making soft rumbling sounds that seemed to join their musical conversation. "We need to get the cub inside now," Dr. Martinez said, her professional instincts overriding her amazement. "Whatever is happening here, that baby bear needs medical attention immediately." The federal agent looked around the parking lot at the circle of bears, at the growing crowd of onlookers recording everything on their phones, at the news vans pulling up at the street entrance. This was no longer a simple wildlife control situation. This was something that would be studied and debated for years to come. "Ma'am," he said to Zara, his tone completely different now, "I'm going to need to make some calls. This situation is unprecedented." Lily looked up at him and said, with startling clarity, "Baby bear sick. Need doctor now." The federal agent stared at her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Take them inside," he said to Dr. Martinez. "I'll handle the paperwork later." But as they started toward the emergency entrance, Zara realized they had an even bigger problem than law enforcement. The news vans weren't just arriving, they were multiplying. Within minutes, the hospital parking lot had become a media circus. Reporters were setting up cameras, trying to get interviews with anyone who had witnessed the impossible procession through the city. And the story was spreading beyond local news. Zara could see satellite trucks from national networks, and people in the crowd were live-streaming everything on social media. The video of a baby holding a bear cub while surrounded by a protective family of wild bears was going viral in real time. "Dr. Martinez," she said urgently, "we need to get inside before this gets completely out of hand." But the veterinarian was looking at something that made her face go pale. "We have another problem," she said quietly. "Look." Zara followed her gaze and saw what had caught her attention. More bears were arriving. Not just a few more, but dozens of them, emerging from every direction and converging on the hospital. It was as if every bear within a 100-mile radius had received some kind of signal and was responding to it. The federal agent was talking rapidly into his radio, trying to explain a situation that defied explanation. "No, sir, I'm not exaggerating. There are at least 40 bears surrounding the hospital, and they're all completely calm. They're not threatening anyone, they're just waiting." The bears were indeed just waiting. They formed concentric circles around the hospital entrance, not blocking anyone but making it clear that they weren't leaving until they knew their young family member was safe. Lily seemed completely unafraid of the growing bear population. If anything, she appeared to be talking to them, making those same musical sounds she had shared with the injured cub. And incredibly, some of the bears were responding, adding their own voices to what was becoming a complex harmony. "This is impossible," the federal agent muttered. "Bears don't coordinate like this. They don't travel in large groups. They don't respond to human children. None of this should be happening." But it was happening, and it was getting more remarkable by the minute. Dr. Martinez made a decision. "Emergency surgery suite right now. I don't care how many bears are out here, or how many reporters are filming. That cub needs immediate medical attention." They rushed through the hospital entrance, followed by the mother bear, who somehow managed to navigate the corridors without knocking anything over. The hospital staff they encountered stood frozen in amazement, but none of them tried to stop the unusual procession. The surgery suite was on the second floor, and Zara worried about how the mother bear would handle the elevator. But the massive animal seemed to understand exactly what the metal box was for. She waited patiently for the doors to open, squeezed inside with obvious difficulty, and stood perfectly still during the short ride up. "She's been in buildings before," Dr. Martinez observed. "Look how she moves. She knows about doors, elevators, human spaces. This isn't her first time interacting with our world." In the surgery suite, Dr. Martinez quickly examined the injured cub while Lily continued to hold and comfort it. The little bear remained calm throughout the examination, occasionally making those musical sounds that Lily would answer with her own harmonious notes. "The paw is definitely broken," Dr. Martinez announced. "But it's a clean break. With proper treatment, it should heal completely. The cub is dehydrated and exhausted, but otherwise healthy." The mother bear was watching every movement, every procedure. When Dr. Martinez prepared the anesthetic, she made a questioning sound. When the veterinarian showed her the IV line that would deliver fluids, she examined it carefully and seemed to approve. "It's like she understands modern medicine," Dr. Martinez murmured. "She knows we're trying to help." But as they prepared for surgery, something happened that made everyone in the room freeze. Lily suddenly stopped making her musical sounds and looked directly at Dr. Martinez. "Mama bear cry," she said with startling clarity. "Baby bear dream bad dreams." Dr. Martinez paused in her preparations. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Lily pointed to the anesthetic mask. "Sleep medicine make baby bear scared. Mama bear need to sing." It was an impossible suggestion from an impossible source. Anesthesia was a medical procedure, not something that could be influenced by singing. But as Dr. Martinez looked at the mother bear, she saw something in those intelligent eyes that made her reconsider. "What if," she began slowly, "we try a lighter anesthetic? Just enough to dull the pain but keep the cub partially conscious. If the mother can stay in contact, provide comfort." It was against every protocol she knew, but then again, everything about this day had been against protocol. The mother bear seemed to understand what was being proposed. She positioned herself where her cub could see her, and as Dr. Martinez administered the modified anesthetic, she began to make low, rhythmic sounds that were unmistakably a lullaby. The effect was magical. The cub relaxed immediately, its breathing becoming steady and calm. Even under light sedation, it continued to make soft musical responses to its mother's song. Dr. Martinez began the surgery with trembling hands, hardly believing what she was witnessing. The cub lay perfectly still, comforted by its mother's presence and Lily's continued soft sounds. The break was repaired, the paw was splinted, and IV fluids were administered, all while mother and child maintained their musical communication. But halfway through the procedure, Doctor Martinez noticed something that made her stop completely. "That's impossible," she whispered. "What's wrong?" Zara asked, fear creeping into her voice. "The healing," Dr. Martinez said, staring at the X-ray monitor. "Look at this." On the screen, they could see the broken bone in the cub's paw. But instead of the clean break she had diagnosed earlier, the bone was already beginning to knit back together. The healing process that should have taken weeks was happening in real time. "Bones don't heal this fast," Dr. Martinez said, her voice filled with awe. "This is medically impossible." Lily looked up at her and said, with that same impossible clarity, "Love makes better fast." Before anyone could respond to this profound statement from a child barely old enough to form sentences, alarms started going off throughout the hospital. Not medical alarms, security alarms. Through the surgery suite windows, they could see that the situation outside had escalated dramatically. The number of bears surrounding the hospital had grown to over 100, and they were no longer just waiting passively. They were protecting the building. Military vehicles had arrived, along with what looked like an entire army of federal agents, wildlife officials, and emergency responders. But every time someone tried to approach the hospital entrance, the bears would form a tighter circle, not threatening, but making it clear that they wouldn't allow anyone to interfere with what was happening inside. The standoff was being broadcast live on every major news network. Social media was exploding with videos and theories about what was happening. Some people were calling it a miracle. Others were demanding military intervention. But inside the surgery suite, something even more extraordinary was occurring. The cub was waking up from the anesthetic, and it was completely healed. Not just the broken paw, but everything. The swelling was gone. The cuts and scrapes from its ordeal in the tram coupling had disappeared, and its energy was completely restored. It stood up on the surgery table and began making those same musical sounds, but stronger now, more joyful. The mother bear's lullaby changed to something that sounded distinctly like celebration. She nuzzled her completely healthy cub, tears of joy streaming down her fur. Dr. Martinez stared at her instruments, at the X-rays, at the evidence of her own eyes. "This defies everything I know about medicine, about biology, about the laws of nature itself." Lily clapped her hands together and laughed with pure delight. "Baby bear all better," she announced. "Mama bear happy." But their celebration was interrupted by a sound that made everyone's blood run cold. Gunshots. Not inside the hospital, but outside. Someone had made the decision to use force against the protective circle of bears. The mother bear's celebration turned instantly to alarm. She gathered her cub close and looked toward the windows, where they could see flashes of light and movement in the parking lot. Lily's expression changed too, from joy to something that looked far too mature for her age. "Bad people hurt bear family," she said, her voice filled with a sadness that broke Zara's heart. The federal agent who had followed them inside was talking urgently into his radio. "Cease fire, I repeat, cease fire. The bears are not aggressive. You're making the situation worse." But the damage was already done. Through the windows, they could see several bears fleeing into the surrounding woods. Others were taking defensive positions, no longer the peaceful guardians they had been moments before. The magical atmosphere of cooperation and wonder was dissolving into fear and chaos. "We have to get them out of here," Zara said urgently. "All of them. Before someone gets hurt." But Dr. Martinez was looking at something on her computer screen that made her face go white. "It's too late for that," she said quietly. "Look." On her monitor was a live news feed showing aerial footage of the hospital. The building was completely surrounded, not just by bears and law enforcement, but by thousands of people. Cars were backed up for miles in every direction. The entire city seemed to be converging on their location. And in the center of it all, the hospital sat like the eye of a storm, with an 18-month-old girl and a family of bears at the heart of something that was changing the world in real time. "What have we started?" Zara whispered. Lily looked up at her with those impossibly wise eyes and said, "Hope, Mama. We started hope." But hope, as they were about to discover, was a dangerous thing when it challenged everything people thought they knew about the world. Because standing at the surgery suite door, flanked by armed guards, was a woman in a dark suit with credentials that made the federal agent step back in deference. "Ma'am," she said to Zara, her voice cold and professional, "I'm Agent Catherine Ross, Department of Extraordinary Phenomena. I'm going to need you and your daughter to come with me. Right now." The mother bear immediately positioned herself between the agent and Lily, her protective instincts fully activated. The cub pressed close to its mother, no longer making musical sounds but soft whimpers of fear. "Agent Ross," the federal agent said carefully, "these bears haven't shown any aggression. The situation is unprecedented, but it's been peaceful." "Not anymore," Agent Ross replied, gesturing toward the windows where the sounds of chaos were growing louder. 3 officers injured, property damage in the millions, and a complete breakdown of civil order. This situation ends now. She looked directly at Lily, who was still standing beside the mother bear. "We need to understand what's happening here, and we need to understand it immediately." But Lily had other ideas. She looked up at Agent Ross and said, with perfect clarity and devastating simplicity, "You scared. Bear's not bad, you make bad." The truth of her words hung in the air like a challenge. This entire crisis had started with a simple act of compassion, a baby trying to comfort a trapped animal. It had grown into something beautiful and impossible, a bridge of understanding between species. And now fear was destroying it all. Agent Ross reached for her radio to call for backup, but before she could speak, every light in the hospital went out. The building was plunged into complete darkness, and in that darkness, something extraordinary began to happen. The bears outside began to sing. Not the threatening roars or growls that everyone expected, but the same melodic, harmonious sounds that Lily and the cub had been making all day. Hundreds of voices joined together in a chorus that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the hospital. In the darkness of the surgery suite, the mother bear and her cub added their voices to the song, and Lily, without hesitation, joined them with her own pure notes. The sound was indescribable. It wasn't just music, it was something deeper, something that touched a part of the human soul that had been dormant for thousands of years. Everyone in the room felt it. Agent Ross, Dr. Martinez, the federal agents, Zara, and all the hospital staff who had gathered in the doorways. Tears began flowing down faces. Hardened law enforcement officers found themselves sobbing without understanding why. The fear and aggression that had been building throughout the day melted away like ice in spring sunshine. Through the windows, they could see something that would be talked about for generations. The thousands of people surrounding the hospital, reporters, law enforcement, curious citizens, even the military personnel, were all standing in perfect silence, listening to the bears' song. Many were crying. Some were reaching out toward the bears, not in fear but in wonder. And slowly, one by one, people began to sing along. They couldn't reproduce the bear's complex harmonies, but they hummed, they made wordless sounds. They added their voices to something that was becoming bigger than any single species could create alone. Agent Ross dropped her radio. Her professional composure completely gone, she sank into a chair and wept openly as the song washed over her. "What is this?" she whispered. "What are they doing to us?" Lily looked at her through the darkness and said, with the wisdom of someone far older than her 18 months, "They showing us how to love." The song continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, and as it gradually faded, the lights came back on throughout the hospital. But the world had changed. Outside, the scene that had been chaos and confrontation just minutes before was now something entirely different. The bears were still there, but they weren't forming protective circles anymore. They were mingling peacefully with the humans, allowing people to approach, to touch them gently, to look into their eyes and see the intelligence and kindness that had always been there. Children who had been kept back by their parents were now running forward to pet the massive animals. The bears responded with gentle nuzzles and those same musical sounds, but softer now, more intimate. Dr. Martinez wiped her eyes and looked at her instruments. Every piece of equipment in the surgery suite was working perfectly, despite the power outage. More than that, the readings on her monitors were showing something impossible. "Everyone in this room," she said in amazement. "Your vital signs, your brain activity, even your cellular regeneration rates. Everything is elevated. It's like the song actually healed us." Agent Ross stood up slowly. Her entire demeanor changed. The cold professionalism was gone, replaced by something softer, more human. "I came here to contain a situation," she said quietly. "I came here to separate dangerous animals from innocent people, but I was wrong about everything." She looked at Lily, who was still standing beside the mother bear and her cub. "What you've shown us today, it's not just about bears and humans getting along. It's about remembering something we lost a long time ago. Something about connection, about understanding, about seeing other beings as family instead of threats." The mother bear approached Agent Ross slowly. The woman stood perfectly still, no longer afraid, as the massive animal gently touched her face with one enormous paw. For a moment they looked directly into each other's eyes, and something passed between them that needed no words. "I have to make a report about today," Agent Ross said finally. "But I think I'm going to recommend that we study this, not contain it. The world needs to know that this is possible." Through the windows, they could see news helicopters circling overhead, but the mood had completely changed. The reporters weren't covering a crisis anymore. They were documenting a miracle. The federal agent who had been helping them all day approached with his radio in hand. "Ma'am," he said to Agent Ross, "I'm getting calls from around the world. Similar incidents are being reported in dozens of cities. Bears approaching humans peacefully, other animals too. Lions, wolves, even sharks are showing completely unprecedented behavior." "It's spreading," Dr. Martinez breathed. "Whatever happened here, it's happening everywhere." Lily clapped her hands together and laughed with pure joy. "All animals friends now," she announced. "All families." The cub, completely healed and full of energy, began playing with Lily like they had been siblings their entire lives. The mother bear watched with obvious happiness, occasionally joining their games with gentle swats of her massive paws. Agent Ross was writing furiously in a notebook. "This changes everything," she muttered. "Conservation efforts, wildlife management, our entire relationship with the natural world. Everything has to be reconsidered." But Zara was thinking about something more immediate and more profound. She looked at her daughter, who had somehow learned to speak in complete sentences in a single day, who had communicated with wild animals, who had been at the center of what appeared to be a global transformation. "Lily," she said softly, "how did you know? How did you know how to talk to them?" Her daughter looked up at her with those impossibly wise eyes and said, "Always knew, Mama. Just forgot how to remember." But Baby Bear helped remember. She turned to the cub and made those musical sounds again. The little bear responded immediately, and for a moment it seemed like they were having a private conversation that no one else could understand. Then Lily looked around the room at all the adults watching her. "Everyone can remember," she said simply. "Just have to listen with heart, not just ears." As if to demonstrate, she walked over to Agent Ross and held out her small hand. The woman took it without hesitation, and for a moment they stood connected in perfect understanding. "You going to help keep families together?" Lily asked. Agent Ross nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to help keep families together." Outside, the sun was setting on a day that had changed the world forever. The bears were beginning to leave, not in fear or because they were being driven away, but because their mission was complete. They had delivered their message, had shown humanity something that had been lost for too long, but the mother bear and her cub remained. They approached Zara and Lily one last time, and the mother bear did something that everyone present would remember for the rest of their lives. She very gently picked up Lily and held her close for just a moment, making soft rumbling sounds that unmistakably meant thank you. Then she set the little girl down and touched her face with the same gentleness she would show her own cub. The cub nuzzled Lily's hand and made those musical sounds one more time. Lily responded with her own notes, and this time, everyone in the room could almost understand what they were saying. "I am us goodbye for now, but not forever. Family is family, no matter what form it takes." The bears walked toward the window and somehow, impossibly, it opened for them. They climbed out onto the fire escape and made their way down to the parking lot, where the other bears were waiting. As they disappeared into the gathering darkness, heading back toward the forests that surrounded the city, the crowd of humans stood in respectful silence, watching until the last great shape vanished among the trees. Lily waved goodbye from the window, and for just a moment everyone could swear they heard an answering call from the darkness, a sound that meant "until we meet again." Dr. Martinez looked around her surgery suite, at the equipment that had recorded impossible readings, at the X-rays that showed miraculous healing, at the blood samples that would probably revolutionize medicine. "I'm going to spend the rest of my career trying to understand what happened here today," she said. Agent Ross closed her notebook and looked at the group that had been part of something extraordinary. "The world is going to be different now," she said. "People saw what happened here. They felt it. You can't unfeel something like that." And she was right. In the days and weeks that followed, the changes were undeniable. Wildlife preserves reported unprecedented cooperation from the animals in their care. Zoos around the world found that the barriers between species seemed less necessary. Children everywhere began demonstrating the same kind of intuitive communication that Lily had shown. But perhaps most importantly, people began to see other beings, human and non-human alike, with different eyes. The song that the bears had sung seemed to have awakened something in the human heart that had been sleeping for too long. Lily continued to grow and develop at an extraordinary pace, but she never lost that special connection she had discovered with the natural world. She became a bridge between species, helping scientists and conservationists understand animal behavior in ways that had never been possible before. And every year, on the anniversary of that impossible morning, she and Zara would return to the spot where it all began, the tram tracks where a tiny cub had been trapped, and a baby's compassion had changed everything. They would stand there quietly, listening, and without fail, they would hear it, the distant sound of singing, carried on the wind from the forests beyond the city. A reminder that families are forever, love transcends all boundaries, and sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can transform the entire world. The bears never forgot the human baby who had shown them that not all people were to be feared, and humanity never forgot the day when a child's pure heart had reminded them what it truly meant to be connected to all life on Earth. It was, as Lily had said in her impossibly wise way, the day everyone remembered how to love.